Okay, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully at this point you have finished. Hopefully it didn't take you too long. Should have took you like 10, 15 minutes, okay, if you were just staying focused. Just kind of filling in the landmarks and the regions, landforms and regions in the United States. So hopefully you have a better sense of where everything is. Now we're going to look at why these regions and landmarks are important. Um, most first thing I want to say is we're going to start with the regions. Every region's a little bit different. We're all located in the United States. We're all under the same government. We are all citizens of the country, but the lifestyle of these people will be a lot different than the people that live in the Bronx. So you're going to see how geography is going to affect that. So the first region we want to start with, and the most important region in terms of your regions as it comes up the most, is the Great Plains or the Heartland. So if you were correct, all right, the Great Plains is going to be located in the middle of the country here, okay? The Great Plains looks nothing like the Bronx. Okay, even in the Bronx, you have a lot of cities, a lot of factories, and you obviously have a lot of hills. Like you have to bike up a hill or walk down a hill. In the Great Plains, there's none of that. Okay, the Great Plains, let's first start, is very flat land. Okay, so the way we're doing this is you're just going to kind of fill in with me, okay, the notes in your Google Docs so you have them, or you could do them in your notebook, but it's probably best just to do them in the Google Doc here. So it's very flat land, okay? And since it's very flat land, that's going to lead to extreme weather. Okay, so when I mean extreme weather, you're going to see things like months without rain, extreme drought, extreme problems, and then it could rain, have the worst thunderstorm you've ever seen, okay, a day later. It could mean that there's going to be tornadoes, there's going to be high winds. So we want to specifically put drought, high winds, and drought is when, drought, if you didn't know, that's when there isn't a lot of rain. Drought, high winds, and can be very, very hot at times. Okay? Extremely hot. So they have extreme weather, very flat land, and a lot of farmland. Okay, and when I mean high winds, I'm talking like it could be 20-mile-per-hour winds in New York, and you barely notice it because we have a lot of buildings that kind of block the wind from really doing anything. You get 20, 30-mile-per-hour winds in flat land where there's literally, like if you stand out in Nebraska where the Great Plains are, if you were to look, you could see for 100 miles down the road. Okay, there's no hills, there's no mountains, so it's extremely flat land, and it's going to lead to a lot of extreme weather. So here's an example of a regions question that you might come across. So starts off in the 1930s. Now I want to make this clear. You're not getting to the 1930s topics in my class until March or April. But just knowing the region and knowing a little bit about, based on the notes we just took and where it is, you can get this answer. Which geographic feature most influenced the westward migration of thousands of people from the southern Great Plains? So why did people leave the southern Great Plains in the 1930s? Okay? And if you take a look, these all have to do with extreme weather, but one specifically is going to be the correct answer. All right, so take a look, see if you can get it, pause the video if you need. And hopefully you're starting to see that the best answer is going to be one. Okay, extended drought throughout the farming areas. You know the Great Plains has a lot of farmland. You know that there's extended drought as part of the extreme weather. Now, there really can't be flooding from the Mississippi River because the Mississippi River is over here. Okay, it is close to the Great Plains, but that is a pretty good answer, but not the best one. Serious earthquakes in the Pacific coastal areas. The Pacific is out over here by the Pacific Ocean, so that can't be it. And destructive hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. That could be it, but the Great Plains is more of the center of the country, so that's not the best answer. Okay? The next region we'll look at is rather important in the beginning of American history, not as much as time goes on, so you'll see it a lot when we do the American Revolutionary War, and that is New England. And New England's located right here. Okay, so New England is located in the northeast corner of the country, and it's a lot different than the Great Plains. Okay, first off, not a lot of farmland. That's a little bit different. Okay, so you can definitely write that down. Rocky soil, short growing seasons. Okay, So what that means is if you try to farm, if you try and farm in New England, which you're farming in the Great Plains, ain't gonna work. Okay, they have a lot of. They are located close to the Atlantic Ocean, so they have a lot of success with fishing and harbors for markets. What that means is harbors for markets are going to be basically where boats and ships are going to pull in where they can trade. So New England, if you live in New England, you could trade out with the rest of the world. Where if you live in the Great Plains, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to get there. All right. No Regents question for that one, but it's just a little bit of help. Okay. The Southern colonies. Now, the Southern colonies is located right over here. Okay. Follow my mouse. It's located over here. All right. And the Southern colonies, okay, or the Southeastern region, has tons of farmland. Oh, and one last thing for New England, colder climate. Cold climate. Southern colonies has a tropical climate. All right? Tropical means hot. All right? So it is a lot warmer there, therefore their farmland is a lot better, and therefore a lot of the people in the South became farmers early on. And this leads to a huge problem, led to the plantation system. A plantation is a term you should be somewhat familiar with, but plantation is a term that is a very big farm, okay? And who worked on plantations? So you're saying it, led to slavery. All right, so you want to talk about indirectly why one of the big reasons why we had slavery for African Americans in our country back then is because the climate required a lot of workers on the southern plantations, and back then a lot of southern plantation owners hired slaves. Okay, and a lot of slaves worked the farmland. So indirectly, geography kind of led to slavery. I mean, it's a lot deeper than that, obviously, but if we had a country that was only consisting of rocky soil like New England and there wasn't a lot of farmland, you could probably bet there wouldn't be slavery. All right? Let's take a look at the Midwest. The Midwest is located between the Great Plains and kind of like where New York is. Okay? It's halfway to the west, kind of back then. All right, the Midwest is located in this particular area. You can see some of the states there. And then the Midwest, okay, there's not a lot of farmland. So how do people in the Midwest, a lot of them make a living? There is a lot of industry. A lot of industry. And for now, we'll look at more what industry is later on. For now, you just got to know there's a lot of factories. There's a lot of factories that are going to create a lot of materials for us to use within our country. Okay, and those jobs are tough to do in terms of the manual labor, but easy if you know how to do it. Okay, there's a lot of industry and factories, extremely cold, especially during the winter. Okay, you don't want to be caught in Michigan or Minnesota throughout this time if you're living in the Midwest. Okay, and the last one we're going to kind of look at is the Ohio River Valley. So you just got to locate the Ohio River, which is right here. Okay, and the Ohio River Valley is important because it's going to be a little tough to explain because we haven't gone to the Mississippi River and Appalachian Mountains yet. But I'm just going to say it's the area between the Mississippi River that word always gets me, and the Appalachian Mountains. Where many people settled after the American Revolution. If you need to pause the video to write that all down, that's good. All right, but these are the major regions. Now, I'm going to skip the Sun Belt for now because really all you know, it takes 2 seconds. The Sun Belt, okay, which is, it's like a belt. So it's the bottom of our country. All right, the bottom of our country is all here. And hopefully you're realizing the further south you go in the country, the warmer it is. I'm just going to say it's the warmest areas in our country. So a lot of older, elderly people, especially living in New York, will move to a place like Florida because it's a warmer area. It's not as much extreme weather. I shouldn't say that. I mean, they have a lot of hurricanes, but in terms of the climate, it's a lot more calmer and relaxing. You don't have to worry about the freezing cold winters in New York. Okay, so it's the warmest climate in our country. That's all you really need to know. All right. We're going to look at 4 landforms, though the first, the third, and the fourth are really the only ones you need to know. I just threw in the Rocky Mountains because you'll see. Okay, so let's look at the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Mountains are located right here. Okay, now what you notice is it's on the east coast of our country and it's close to New York, which is right here. So why is the Appalachian Mountains important? Well, you need to have a little bit of background knowledge from 7th grade to really help you understand. But we were owned by Great Britain. All right, Great Britain used to be located all the way out, okay, in the Atlantic Ocean by Europe. So a lot of the first settlers that came to the United States came through the Atlantic Ocean and ended up on the East Coast, and we know it as today as the 13 colonies, which eventually became 13 states. Why they didn't keep going westward was as people kept going westward, they ran into these major mountains. So in the year 1730, there were no planes, so no one was going to fly over these mountains, and most people weren't going to walk over the mountains. So most people just said, okay, I guess we'll stop here and settle here. All right, so many of the first, Americans that came, all right, came and stopped at the Appalachian Mountains and established our first country, which was the 13 colonies. Okay, and if I just show you here where our country first started. All right, let's see if we can find a good one. Yeah, this is perfect here. Okay, this is our entire country, but this is all that we started with. That is because the Appalachian Mountains took them through here and established our first states there. All right, so in terms of what you need to write down, the Appalachian Mountains, okay, it's a natural boundary that stopped the first. Now, when I say the first Americans, I'm just not going to say the Native Americans. It's a separate topic, okay, but the first Americans from moving further westward. Okay. And also, we got to kind of say, which is important. Well, you know what? There's more of an American history thing. We don't need to write it down, but it made it easier for Great Britain to rule us because it was closer to their land. Okay, which we'll talk about more later on. But the Appalachian Mountains, okay, natural boundary that stopped the first Americans from moving first westward. Okay, established where the first 13 colonies or states be. All right. So, why this place is important? Regents question. The original settlements in the 13 British colonies were all located where? So take a second, look at your regions, look at your map, pause the video, and then tell me where they were all located. All right. As you can tell, it is not a trick. It is one, east of the Appalachian Mountains. Okay? So, as you can tell, the Appalachian Mountains would be here. Okay, and they all got established right there. All right? Moving back to this map here, we're going to look at the Rocky Mountains. The Rocky Mountains are located here. All you really need to know are two things. It's our biggest mountain range in the United States. Actually carries well up into Canada. It is huge, the Rocky Mountains. Okay, higher altitudes. But why you need to know it is it stopped people during Manifest Destiny. Okay, if you remember that term from 7th grade, which was to stop westward, it was to try and encourage people to move westward throughout our country. People during Manifest Destiny started moving westward and they started going into the Great Plains, and then they got to the Rocky Mountains. They're like, oh my, that's a big mountain to get over, and a lot of people stopped, okay, and established themselves in the Great Plains and in Texas. All right, so stop people during Manifest Destiny, and Lewis and Clark in their expeditions. Lewis and Clark, again, group will go over a little bit later on. But this isn't a trick question, but I just wanted to show you what one would look like, which geographic feature caused the biggest problem for Lewis and Clark's expedition. That would be the Rocky Mountains, because they are so incredibly large, our biggest mountain range in the United States. All right, let's take a look at our most important river, and then we'll finish up with the Great Lakes and we'll be done. So the Mississippi River is extremely important throughout American history. It comes up a bunch. It's a huge reason why we wanted to buy the Louisiana Purchase, as you can tell. So the Mississippi River starts here by the Gulf of Mexico. You're going to learn the Port of New Orleans soon, okay? And what it's going to do is it's going to come from the Gulf of Mexico, and if you follow my mouse, comes up this way, and then eventually goes up here, and then comes across this way here. So the Mississippi River, first and foremost, we need to start, is the largest river in the United States. Okay. Now, we need to understand this basic concept. Okay. The basic concept is this. If you can get to the Gulf of Mexico, you could then get out to the Atlantic Ocean, and then you could trade out with the rest of the world. If you lived in a place like the New England region, like Boston, all you had to do was leave Boston and you could hit the Atlantic Ocean, you could trade with the rest of the world. But let's say you lived in the Great Plains. How do you trade with the rest of the world? Well, hypothetically, what you could do is, and this is why the Mississippi River is so important, is, let's go back to this map, okay? If you lived in the Great Plains, if you lived in, let's say, the state of Kansas, you would hop on the Mississippi River in the boat, take the boat south into the Gulf of Mexico, take the Gulf of Mexico to the Atlantic Ocean, and then boom, you could trade with the rest of the world. Okay, so the Mississippi River was an important waterway that helped people in, this is why it's important to know the regions, in the Great Plains and the Midwest, travel and trade with the rest of the world. Now, if you lived in the Great Plains in 2020, you get on a plane, you could travel anywhere you want. In 1790, the only way you could travel and trade was via boat. So what you'll see is a lot of people, and this should make sense, back during the early parts of American history, and this is consistent in world history, where do they live? They're going to live near the oceans, lakes, and rivers. Because if they needed to trade or they needed to travel throughout the world, they needed to live near a river. If you lived in, let's say, a good example, let's say right over here by South Dakota. If you are hundreds of miles away from a river, you can't travel, you can't trade. You have to pretty much be what's called self-sufficient and live on your own, okay? Because you're not getting help from the rest of the world. But if you can get to a river like the Mississippi River or live near the Atlantic Ocean, you can be fine and trade with the rest of the world. Okay, and I want you to do this question. Since the late 1700s, the Mississippi River has been a vital or important waterway because it what? Take a look. All right, see if you can get the answer. Pause the video if you need. All right, these are your Regents questions practice. These are a lot of the multiple choice tests, a lot of the tests you have in this class. Eventually, the Regents you take, you'll see a lot of these types of questions. All right, the correct answer for this one is 4. Provided farmers and merchants an outlet to the Gulf of Mexico. An outlet means a place you can enter through. Okay? Now, let's look at all of these choices. It can't be 1 because it doesn't divide the country from north and south. It divides it to east and west. Okay? So it runs north to south, but this is now the east of the Mississippi and west of the Mississippi. So that can't be the correct answer. All right? Allowed American farmers direct access to Canadian markets. Well, it gets close to Canada, but it doesn't go to Canada, so that can't be it. Connected the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. Very similar concept. The Great Lakes are here, but it doesn't connect. It gets close. Okay, it doesn't connect, though, so that's not the best answer either. The best answer is going to be 4. All right, the last thing we'll look at are the Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes are located, kind of just saw here, right up here. What you notice is there are 5 lakes. You got Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, Lake Ontario. And what you kind of notice is this is a better activity in class, but you kind of notice that all of these lakes are kind of connected. So if you can essentially get to Lake Ontario, you can get to Lake Superior. And what that means is you could travel all throughout the Midwest. So this made the Midwest a lot more powerful because they now had waterways that they could travel through. Okay, and then you'll eventually see the Erie Canal, which we'll talk about later. But this is 5 lakes located in the Midwest. That are all connected. All right, and also just very similar to the Mississippi River, helps with travel and trade. All right, very similar to the Mississippi River. Think about it. We are going to have now people that are going to move to the Midwest because they could use the Great Lakes to travel and trade to more parts of the country. Okay, they're not going to be isolated where they are. So a lot of people started to move to the Midwest. And the Midwest became a stronger place for that. So what happens is overall, when you're near a body of water, like New York is to the Atlantic Ocean or Boston or let's say Chicago near the Great Lakes, the closer you are to water, generally the better the economy is because people could bring more products in and people live a generally easier life. So a lot of these populations, why New York has such a high population, there's so many people living here, is because we used to be the center of trade for the world. Okay, people used to come into New York, okay, and trade because they knew that New York was located close to the ocean. All right, so here's what you have to do. Once you've taken your notes, okay, you're going to share this entire document with me. You're just going to hit turn in. So I'm going to look at 2 things. I'm going to look to see and make sure that these answers are correct. There's no reason why they shouldn't be because we've kind of done them. You should have done them on your own, and then we kind of just went over them. Make sure these answers are correct. You will get a grade for that. And then I'm just looking to see that you have also done the notes here as I fix a typo there. All right. And that should be it. All right. What's going to happen tomorrow is you're going to get at the very beginning of class, you're going to get a quick matching. I'm not even going to call it a quiz. It's just a little classwork assignment where you can still use this to help you, but you kind of match up why these places are important. Okay. To see, to check for understanding. All right. So that's going to be it for today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. If you're on the class Instagram, I probably will post a Instagram post. You're welcome to work through that or answer a question based on the work we did today. All right, or just kind of throw me a like to show that you're there and you care. All right, I appreciate you guys following through with this, and we will do some work on government tomorrow before we get into our first full lessons of U.S. History Regents class. Thank you, guys.